Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Justin Ferrabee, co-founder of Fieldless Farms, a company changing the way we grow food for local customers. Back to Justin. One of the things that comes up with immense irregularity and when I interview entrepreneurs is, or many, I'd say probably the majority of entrepreneurs, is that they tend to have a profound connection to the idea that's kind of beyond logic, that's beyond the importance that they place on money. They have a deep connection. I'm wondering, it strikes me that you guys are all senior people. You've come across this in the way that you've explained. There's certainly easier ways to make money. Do you found a connection to the product that's bigger than just kind of the fact that it makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we would each have a different attachment to it. I mean, you know all the partners in the firm, and you know them well enough to know what they each have different interests, and we all come to it for different reasons. But the reasons we come to it, we believe in, and we have John, the CEO, is very focused on the quality of the product and growing things and innovating and doing better. And he does this as a project of passion. There's no doubt he would be doing this if he was paid or not paid, and he did it for a very long time and wasn't paid. So he's I mean, we all know the long days and nights that come with this and the sacrifices you make, and he would gladly make them for his passion in this. And for me, it's more about changing systems and the idea that many of the things we do because we did them before and they no longer work for what we're doing. And if we're going to change and be better at sharing this planet, then we're going to have to do things differently. And you can't do things differently unless you do things differently. And so there's kind of two ways you can change the world. You can run around and persuade people that we have to make change and hope that we reach consensus on something and then everyone agrees to that and then we do a big change. COP26 or COP 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 26, any of these big system changes, and they're necessary. But that's one strategy. The other strategy is you go and you do it, you succeed at it, and you show the world that you did it, and everyone else says, hey, that was pretty good, I'll do it. And so others start to do it, and then they get better and easier, and it's more accessible. And so we've largely gone with the latter strategy, and it's just because we get our satisfaction from seeing something built and operating, deployed, and running. That is where the satisfaction comes from. The idea isn't, I want to see the lettuce in a store that somebody can buy and eat and enjoys. Otherwise, there's lots of things we can sit around and talk about, but the difficulty is in the deploying and the actualization of that idea. And although it sounds so straightforward and so simple, it's not. And it's the work in doing that attracted me. And I think each partner has their own thing that they came to it from, and they have a passion for their part of it. And it really worked well. And we all collaborated pretty well in birthing this.
Now, leaving aside for a minute, obviously all the effort, time, money, et cetera, that goes into this ultimately leads to or needs to lead to a sale. But leaving aside for a moment the fact that you've picked up a pretty substantial retailer who now carries the product, what was the first big win where you knew, this retailer aside, when was the first big win where you knew that it was working?
When you grow something for the first time and you see it, it's working. There were steps along the way that said we were on the right track, but at each stage it's gated. You got to get through this gate in order to get to the next one. And so you get through a gate, you're like, wait a second, this could actually be real. Getting the rights to a technology first, then going through and trying it out, and then testing the idea on other places, and then raising a little bit of money from family and friends, and then building something, then growing something, and then somebody buys the thing you're growing. And so there's little steps along the way, and in each one you can see the next, and you get to the next, and then you see that next one shows you that from there, and then all of a sudden it opens up, and you realize that this is really the nature of the challenge changes at each stage, and you've got scaling, and you've got different complexities and operational complexities, and it's just the ability to apply your collective efforts to optimize for each next stage. And I don't think there was a point where it was like, okay, we've made it. So I'm not sure we still feel that. There's an absolute awareness and determination and a sense of obligation to continue to deliver the next thing that we see. And we see much more than what we've done, because we have to have those things realized. And that process of conceiving of and then realizing or manifesting that And that process never stops. And I know that there's new things on the horizon. I know that the team does a lot of research on a lot of things all the time. They have to prioritize. They got to make choices, but it's always about manifesting the next right thing.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I, in interviewing another entrepreneur a couple of weeks ago, they made the same point, that it's an unending journey. So you know, a lot of people that I interview talk about a certain level of compulsion that they have. Like, it's not like they showed up, you know, one day at university and said, well, do I want to become a librarian or become an entrepreneur? There was something that triggered them. You know, maybe they were born into it and always wanted to work for themselves, or they came upon an idea and felt that they wanted to make that their life work. But the reality is that they are driven to follow something that really is never ending. And I mean, I think that's a complex part of being an entrepreneur, is that, you know, every time you achieve one level of success, another door opens and presents another opportunity to create success. You know, maybe that's just part of the joy of being an entrepreneur. I don't really know.
Maybe. I think you're definitely describing something that feels familiar to me, and I see it in my partners, and that is there's an almost endless energy to do the next thing and to try the next thing. And so I don't think it's an intellectual choice to say, I mean, there are certainly days where you say, you know, I've got to get up and do this and I don't really want to, but for the most part, you believe in what you're doing and you're doing it. And it is there's something about when you're doing what is your thing. And I've worked in big companies and struggled with the structure, and have been much happier when I've been in an environment where we have control of what we're doing, and you're taking your own risks, but they're your risks, and you can impact the outcomes. And so you're taking your own chances, and you're relying on yourself and your team members. So there's something about that, and there's almost like for me, the greatest metaphors are artists. So a painter just paints. Would that painter paint if they sold things for a little or for a lot? They'd still paint. It's what they do. Right. It's something is satisfied in them when they paint. And I've always been a fan of the artist Christo, who he does installation arts in natural environments. He wrapped Arc de Triomphe. He's wrapped an island. He's just big things. And as I understand it, there's an impact that it has when you see something. There's a shock value, not shock, but there's that outstanding thing, and it connects you to the real environment. But the other thing is that he takes pictures of the process. He has to get planning permission. He has to get a community of people. He has to source all the materials. He does all that stuff. He documents it all. And at the end of the installation, he takes it all down. And the only thing that exists is the experience of those who participated in the documentation of it. And there's something in that for me, which is a process art. He's taken something that wasn't there. He's worked with the social system to make something happen. He's brought it to the world who has been impacted by its presence. And then he dismantles it and he moves on to the next thing. And that, for some reason, has always resonated for me, that business is a very creative process. You're manifesting something where there was nothing. It is entirely reflecting your own ideas about what should be. And you're trying to impact and shape that through your actions and your risks you take and all of that. And I think that most of the people I know who have consistently done entrepreneurial things have a need to create. They're largely creative people. They're not necessarily huge risk takers. They're just able to manage complex risks, and they're confident in themselves to do that. And the need to create something is just what they do. And if they were in a big company, they'd figure out how to create something on the side, or it's just this natural intensity. And sometimes it's harnessed and directed, and sometimes it's dynamic, and sometimes it's frenetic, but there's an energy there that I don't know if it's identity. I don't know what it is. I don't, and I know lots of entrepreneurs who do lots of therapy, so it doesn't go away. It's not a dysfunction. It's just, it's an identity component, and it is who you are, and you got to express it. You got to do it. And some people just keep doing it. And I don't know why. And you keep doing it, and I keep doing it. And most of the entrepreneurs I know, that's what they do. That's what they do.
You know what?
And sorry, I'm going on
no,
here.
Actually,
it's like an ecosystem, right? There are.
What you've just said is exactly why I call this program The Creators. It's not, and interestingly, I interviewed somebody recently who will be appearing shortly in the channel, and she is somebody that grew up in a family that collected art. She studied art history, and now her business organizes, basically curates art for private clubs and boutique hotels. And, I was talking to her a little bit about, how she stays current. And she says, partly it's where she works and partly it's the artists themselves. And in that moment, it occurred to me that there is a lot of parallels between the artist and the entrepreneur, because exactly what you said, like, an artist paints, and whether they got paid $1 million or $1, they would still paint. Like the money is almost an aside to what they feel compelled to do. And likewise, I've seen the exact same thing with entrepreneurship. You've framed it beautifully, I think, because to navigate the complexity, to see the patterns, to create something and bring it to life, I think there's a lot of parallels with artists, and that's why I call this the creators. Not just because people create businesses, but because of that, what you're saying. So,
well done.
One of the things I'm curious about, I know that you're somebody that is equipped and could have done anything, and I know as well that you had, at one time in your career, you had worked for a very large consultancy. So as somebody that could have, for those who are unaware, large consultancies tend to pay pretty well. Why did you choose to walk away from that and focus on entrepreneurship?
The best way to describe it for me is, and this is old, and Maslow's hierarchy and all the stuff from Psych 101, but the idea at the top of the pyramid is actualization. And without it being too esoteric, the idea is what you were saying earlier, and your thesis for the whole podcast or the channel is that people do what they do, and if they are doing what's true to themselves, they will actualize. They will be who they are. Your internal world and your external world will positively reflect each other. And the more I worked in big systems, and I want to be careful not to be critical of those systems. They're very critical. They're very important aspects to everything working, and there are people who that's very well suited for, and I respect that, and they're tremendously successful. And but I wouldn't actualize. I would have to subordinate my ideas to the larger picture rather than to champion my own ideas. And I wouldn't actualize. I would sub-optimize, and I think I would be filled with regret and largely be less of who I think I am or needed to be. And that sounds perhaps esoteric, but I wouldn't have survived or thrived in those environments, and that wouldn't have been good for them or for me. And so the challenge is to subordinate your ego to that, because there's a lot of prestige that comes with some of those things, and that comes with the money, and it comes with the role and the clients, and you take a lot of risk. And so you don't live in the biggest house anymore. You don't drive the nicest car. You don't attend the same clubs. You're not flying business class, and you're doing the things you got to do, and they're gritty and they're hard and they're risky and they often don't pay off. But you don't mind, because it's actually just feels more right and suited. And if you are listening to yourself and you know that that's right for you, then you'll do that and you'll be happier no matter what the outcome. And you may have regrets. There are certainly times when things are dark and I think, oh, shoot, I could have just done that and it wouldn't be so dark. But that's not true.
Do you know what? Again, you pretty much just described my life. So thank you for uncovering me in a very uncomfortable way, Justin Ferrabee. I appreciate that. So my last question to you is, obviously, as somebody that has been around and has become a bit of a serial entrepreneur, what are the big lessons? Like, just give me the 3 biggest lessons that you would pass on to someone that would make a difference in smoothing the bumpy bits of their journey into entrepreneurship.
I would say the first one is that you, it's almost trite to say know thyself, and we all know, where that comes from and how important it is to know yourself. And I think that if you work with that for long enough, you understand what its true meaning is, which is you need to know why it is you're doing what you're doing. And probably the first piece is don't lie to yourself. So you got to know yourself, and you got to know when you're bullshitting yourself and when you're not. Because if you're fooling yourself, you're not going to fool anybody else, right? It doesn't work if you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And so you got to know that, and it's really got to start there. And so in order to know you're doing it for the right reasons, you got to know yourself. And that sounds trite, but if you spend any time focused on that, you'll see that that's a very important piece. And the second piece is that there's a lot of advice out there on how to do business, and I think that most of it's good and sound, but the one that always rises to the top is everything starts with the customer. It starts with the problem the customer has, and you got to work backwards from that. And although you may have something much smarter that you think is more elegant as a way to do something, the innovation in itself is not necessarily better or useful unless it can be deployed and applied to somebody who would pay for it. And that's where you start. And you need to really like those people and want to help those people and spend time with those people and have insight with those people and want to be able to do something so that they can succeed with it. Because if you don't, then you'll lose your energy for something, and the novelty of the innovation will die off very quickly, and you'll be stuck with just slogging something along. So you want to know that you're doing something for somebody. So the first thing is you got to know yourself and not fool yourself. The second thing is you got to know who you're doing, what you're doing for, and what success is going to look like for them. And the third piece, I think, would be as you're building out, we have a little bit of a celebrity culture around entrepreneurs. There's a romance to it, and this idea that I'm the self-made person, and the idea of I did it all myself, and I beat my own drum, and I make my own rules, and I disrupt everything. And there's something that's unhelpful in that, because it's been my experience that you can't do this on your own. And you have to be working with other people, which means you have to be somebody who is good and easy to work with. And if you can't collaborate with people who want to buy from you, or people who want to work with you, or people who want to fund you, then it's not going to work. And you just don't do it on your own. And you can take some satisfaction in the success when you have been a driving force, but you didn't do it on your own. And if someone is helping you, it's really hard for them to watch you sit there, take credit for everything that you've done when you did it with other people. And so I would say that those are the three kind of the top things. You got to know yourself, you got to know who you're doing it for, and you got to be able to do it with other people.
That is awesome advice, man. That is so fantastic. I could talk to you. You're dreamy to look at. You're fantastically fun to talk to. I mean, you just got it all going on, Justin Ferrabee. So I just want to say thank you very much for the time you spent. And I would encourage anybody.
Thanks, Robert. It's a real pleasure. And this is an important thing you're doing. And I really appreciate you including me on it. And I wish you the best of luck on anything I can ever do to help you be successful with this, because this is the kind of thing that people need to see and know and understand as they go on their own journey.
Do you know, thank you for saying that. I was going to say, I've in the last couple of weeks, I've interviewed a couple of really fascinating Indian entrepreneurs. Both of them came from what can only be described as poor backgrounds. But their families worked hard, paid for their education. They went into business school, and they've launched ventures. And even with the backgrounds that they've had, they talk about the fact that they did not want to create a business that was just about money. They wanted to have a social impact. And the reason I'm telling you this is because the thing that drives me crazy is that there's such a negative perspective of business. And it's like 90% of companies are small companies, and they employ 70% of us. It's like, there's so much about business that is positive. And when I talk to entrepreneurs and find out the positive effect that they want to have on the world, I just don't get it. And I think you're right. Having these stories and finding out what really makes somebody who starts a business tick, I think is really important.
And you're finding the people who want to make a difference, and you're showing it to each other. And that's one of the ways to change the world, is that you see somebody else has done it, and you think, you know what, I'm more like that person. I can do it like that person. I don't have to be an SOB and be grinding away for greed and money and all that kind of stuff. I want to get paid for sure, and I want to be tested on the financial viability of something to prove it out. But most people are doing it for another reason. I really appreciate you bringing us these stories.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And thanks again. Thanks so much for sticking to the end of our two-part interview with Justin Ferrabee, co-founder of Fieldless Farms. I love Justin's energy and how he put the pieces together between a background in one industry and how it led to creating an innovative solution in another, and the self-actualization entrepreneurship has provided him. On a closing note, I'd like to give a big shout out to my amazing sponsor, the Innovation Hub at Carleton University, dedicated to helping create leaders just like Justin Ferrabee. To find out more, visit them at www.carleton.ca/innovationhub. And please remember to hit like and subscribe for more great stories of inspired entrepreneurs. See you next time.